ecstatic Super Bowl rally upended by the terror of a mass shooting, George Santos sues late-night host Jimmy Kimmel for tricking him into making videos to ridicule him, dandelions and shrubs to replace rubber, new grains, and more. Are alternative crops realistic? Today is Sunday, February 18th, 2024, and this is the Dunkley Report. Kansas City was at its highest moment of community pride, celebrating a Super Bowl win, when it experienced one of 21st century American culture's most traumatic events, a public mass shooting. By the time it was over, one woman was dead and nearly 24 other Chiefs fans were wounded. Police now blame a dispute between several people. On Friday, 2 juveniles were charged with gun-related and resisting arrest charges. Additional charges are expected in Wednesday's post-Raleigh shooting. While it lasted only moments, it has left a knocked-back community struggling to make sense of how something so positive could turn so quickly into something so terrifying and sad. Former U.S. Representative George Santos is suing late-night host Jimmy Kimmel. Santos says Kimmel deceived him into making videos on the Cameo app that were used to ridicule the disgraced New York Republican on air. The lawsuit alleges that Kimmel misrepresented himself to induce Santos to create personalized videos capitalizing on and ridiculing Santos' gregarious personality. The videos were used on Kimmel's show for a segment called Will Santos Say It?, a Disney representative listed as a media contact. Kimmel's show didn't immediately respond to an email seeking comment Saturday. Santos was expelled from the House of Representatives last year. He has pleaded not guilty to numerous criminal charges. Many companies, philanthropic organizations, and national and international entities tout the promise of alternative crops to fight climate change. They fund initiatives promoting crops like sorghum and cassava, declare the year of the millet, or give grants to researchers working on dandelions that could one day replace rubber. But while some of the researchers and farmers on the other side of that funding are optimistic about the potential of these crops and say they are important in certain parts of the world to fight hunger, they also say drastic changes would need to happen in markets and processing before we ever see fields full of these out-of-the-box plants, especially in the U.S., where corn and soybeans remain dominant. Large numbers of Americans believe the founders intended the U.S. to be a Christian nation. The belief is especially strong among Republicans and their white evangelical base. Historians say such views misread and simplify a complex history. The Constitution doesn't privilege any religion, and it puts a premium on religious freedom. Founders included some Christians and some who would fail any test of Christian orthodoxy, while many Americans today hold general God and country sentiments. Pollsters say a smaller group wants Christian-based laws or an official declaration of Christian nationhood. Surveys have found they're more likely to be distrustful of outside groups. George Washington was uneasy about the idea of commemorating his life. He was the first leader of a new republic, not a tyrant. And yet, the nation will once again celebrate the first U.S. president on Monday, 292 years after he was born. The meaning of President's Day has changed dramatically over the centuries. At first, the day was often unremarkable and filled with work for Washington himself. Today, his birthday is a bonanza of consumerism, and the reason many people get a 3-day weekend. Some historians say the holiday has lost all discernible meaning and lacks recognizable traditions. That is, unless you want to count sales from retailers. Authorities in Virginia are investigating the cause of a house explosion and fire that killed one firefighter, injured 10 others, and leveled a home in a Washington, D.C. suburb. Firefighters were called to the home in Sterling, Virginia, by a report of a gas smell at about 7:30 p.m. Friday, they found a 500-gallon underground propane tank with a leak on the side of the residence. A short time later, a fiery explosion took place while firefighters were inside the home. Chief Keith Johnson says a cause has not been determined, but it is likely propane-related. Police say the deaths of 2 people who were shot in a dorm room at the University of Colorado Springs will be investigated as homicides. The Colorado Springs Police Department says in a social media post that the shootings Friday morning do not appear to be murder-suicide. The victims, who were not immediately identified, were found dead when police responded to a report of a shooting around 6 a.m. Police say the coroner's office will determine how they died, but each person was shot at least once. A lockdown across campus lasted for about 90 minutes, and later was isolated to a student apartment complex. The school, about 69 miles south of Denver, remained closed for the day. The U.S. Census Bureau is thinking about how to ask about sex, and dozens of health officials, civil rights groups, individuals, and businesses have weighed in about how the agency should ask about sexual orientation and gender identity for the first time on its most comprehensive survey of American life. An Associated Press review of the 91 written public comments shows them to be largely supportive of the proposed additions, though not without some constructive criticism. The proposed questions are geared mostly toward people age 15 and older, and they would be the first questions to directly ask about these topics on the broad American Community Survey. The U.S. Census Bureau plans to test questions about sexual orientation and gender identity for its most comprehensive survey of American life. The test questions will be sent to 480,000 households. If the questions are approved, it will be the first time sexual orientation and gender identity questions are asked on the American Community Survey. People can respond to the questions online, by mail, over the phone, or through in-person interviews. Given privacy concerns, the agency is proposing using flashcards for in-person interviews and using numbered response categories for people who don't want others in their household to know their responses. Federal authorities said the second critically endangered North Atlantic right whale found dead in the last month showed injuries consistent with a collision with a ship. The whales number less than 360, and they have experienced decline in recent years. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration said it was notified of a dead right whale floating off Savannah, Georgia, on February 3. The agency said late Friday that a necropsy of the animal found evidence of blunt force trauma, including fractures of the skull and that those injuries are consistent with a vessel strike prior to death. Today's news was reported by the Associated Press. This has been the international news for Sunday, February 18th, 2024. Thanks again for joining us here at the Dunkley Report.